Hello, everyone. Welcome to HR Bytes. HR Bytes is a podcast and video series that brings you stories of everyday HR professionals who bring a think globally and act locally digital HR agenda to their work. Everyday people who are driving digital transformations in their organizations, data-driven and future-fit digital HR leaders. This is your host, Jay Polaki, and today's guest needs no introduction. WilliamTincup is the president and editor-at-large of RecruitingDaily, and I'll let William tell you more about what he does. Welcome to HR Bytes, William. So happy to have you on the show today.
Jay, it's a pleasure to be on the show and to talk with your audience. Quick introduction. I've been studying HR tech for 20 plus years, done it from a couple different vantage points. I fell in love with HR. So I kind of came up through marketing. If you kind of care enough to look at a LinkedIn profile, I kind of came up that way. But I fell in love with HR and fell in love with recruiting and haven't really looked back. I do a lot of work with practitioners, so people that do the job day in and day out. I also do a lot of work with vendors, technology vendors, all across the vertical of sourcing and outplacement, if you will. So every kind of technology that you can imagine in recruiting and HR, I work with the vendors and I also work with practitioners. So happy to be here and also happy to learn from you.
Absolutely. You are kind of the living and breathing example of the think globally and act locally digital HR mindset that we are in need of today more than ever before in human resources. And I know you work with a lot of companies, tech startups and established companies as on their board of advisors as well as, a consultant. How do you think this pandemic has fast forwarded tech adoption in our HR functions?
It's a great question, Jay. I think one of the things that it made us, some of these things we would have gotten to over years. But it fast tracked, to your point. It fast tracked. We had to learn remote over a week. It's like we came in on Monday and it's like, okay, next Tuesday everyone's going to be working remote.
Yeah.
And so it sped up everything that we had already kind of started down the process. We had remote employees. But like hiring remotely. So you now have your sourcing team that's remote, your recruiters that are remote, your hiring managers that are remote, and your candidates that are remote. So we had to learn, and hiring's. I know we're in a recession, and I know there were a lot of layoffs, but there are also a lot of companies hiring. So they had to actually learn how to hire again, but to do it differently. So things like video interviews, how do we now embrace that, and then not just embrace it, but fully put on the pedal? Virtual onboarding. We might have been really great at onboarding in a traditional sense. You come into the office, you do this bid, you got this training, but now we have to do it virtual because we're virtual. In HR, and our employees, our candidates that now are new, freshly minted employees, they're virtual. So now, how does that look? How do we do that? Zoom performance reviews. Okay, you're still do a performance review. You've worked here for a year or 6 months, or 3 months, whatever the bid is for the company. How do you do that? Okay, we used to kind of go down and have coffee or go to the conference room and do a bit. Well, okay, you can't do that bit like that anymore. So, I mean, there's probably thousands of examples of things that we were accustomed to doing in person that we can't and still can't to a large degree do in person. We might not ever do them in person again, but so it sped those things up, Jay.
Absolutely. Kind of at warp speed, I would think, taking the term from Star Trek.
100%. 100%. You had to learn overnight. It's like, okay, you're virtually on board 100 employees next week.
Exactly. And, we all muddled through it in the past 9 months. And now here we are. We've learned in the past 9, 10 months. And now we are here to apply all that learning to make it better and, redo. I think Jason Auerbrook at his keynote in one of his recent conferences through LeapGen mentioned that this is the year of re. We reinvent, we renovate, we relearn, we
Which is
reinvigorate.
well, first of all, Jason's super smart, and I love him. The concept though, that might not be a concept for just this year. We might need to kind of be in that rethinking of everything all the time. Like it might not ever be static again. That might be one of the big learns from the pandemic and remote work in general, is that we got kind of fixed into a one way of doing things. And I think yes, we are relearning and retooling and reorganizing our processes and things like that. But maybe that's the new normal, is that we're continually in a reorganization of reprioritizing of things all the time. Maybe that's what we should be doing, is rethinking things nonstop.
Absolutely. I think that's part of the agile thinking and the design thinking model
Yeah,
that we need to
100%.
adopt in HR. And so
Absolutely.
that constant iteration of that innovative
Right.
cycle and our mindset and thinking.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating, Jay, because we're not accustomed to that. That's not the way that we have been brought up. It's not the way we were taught in school, etc. But I think you're right. I think agile as a framework and design thinking as a framework to think about, it's never done. So like we used to think traditionally, you do your onboarding process and then that's done. And then you can move on to another process or whatever. But I think one of the things that we've learned about that is that it's never done, which is a little unsettling. Like you like the idea, like, okay, that's done. We crossed off the list. And I think that the agile and design thinking force us to think it's never off the list. It moves down further down on the list, but you're going to come back to it faster.
Absolutely. And we've in HR, we've always had this saying. I've heard it a number of times. Why fix something when it's not broken? But you got to move away from that, right? It's all broken
100%.
right now.
100%. We got a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity in front of us, and it's also it's a good time to be in HR. I mean, it's a great time to be in HR and recruiting, quite frankly.
Absolutely. You've established companies, you've helped establish companies, and you've worked with organizations across the globe, and your network is so humongous. What role do you think your social capital plays, especially your connections within an organization, when you're incubating and scaling innovation in the HR department, so to speak?
I think the thing is it's quantity and quality. So you can have a large network, but if they're not engaged, it's a big so what. Or you can have a small network, but it's highly engaged, but it's small. So I think one of the things is you bring those two forces together for a purpose of both having quantity and quality, but you got to have engagement. And what it's done for me is it helps me learn faster. So take like just what we went through at the very early stages of COVID, because of a large network in Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc. I could learn from other people really quickly. Communication strategies and again, like we talked about, onboarding strategies, like little bitty things. But because hundreds of thousands of people were then having those discussions, I could tease out of it what I needed to learn, and also what I could give advice to practitioners and also vendors about. So I think the thing about having a network is you've got to be able to, if you feed the network, right? So you got to put good things out there yourself and be a part of that. You can't just be a taker. You also have to give back to your network. And when you have a large network and it's an engaged network, I think it speeds up everything. That speeds up your knowledge. The flow of learning just happens at a higher clip. So I think that's, for me, I definitely know that just in the first months of COVID, with everything that was up in the air, everyone was trying to figure things out fast. And there was a lot of collaborating, a lot of online collaborating, a lot of Google Sheets, a lot of things that were being shared. And again, if you're not part of those networks, or if you don't even know if those networks are available, then you're not learning as fast as you probably possibly could.
Absolutely. And especially with everything available now virtually and Zoom and so many other
100%.
platforms available for that kind of communication, I think it's really helped my learning as well. And I can say that for my young nephews, they are learning at warp speed themselves. So when
100%.
I see them
100%.
learning, and they're like these data sponges, they've become encyclopedias overnight. Not that they weren't before, but now even more so. And just seeing that
Absolutely.
the next generation is not going to be anything like what this generation is. Absolutely, it's
No,
totally a
no, a
big
great
change.
example of that is an HR conference I was a part of last year. It was a VR, virtual reality conference. And so they sent me an Oculus headset,
Hmm.
and I was on a conference call. So my boys came in and asked me, "Hey, can we open this up?" It was just, I get packages from vendors all the time. So I said, "Yeah, yeah, whatever." Pack it. So they unpacked it. They watched videos on YouTube about it. They had already drawn off a square in our living room, and they were playing games on the Oculus headset by the time I got off the conference call.
Absolutely. and,
Like,
and think
like
about
think
all.
how fast that adoption happened.
Exactly. Think about that. My dog has learned how to come and ask for a treat every time I'm on Skype. And this
Yep.
happened a long time before COVID. He
Oh
knows
yeah.
when I'm
Oh
on
yeah.
Skype, and he will come ask for a treat because he knows I'm on Skype
That's
and he needs
genius.
to. He's a genius.
That's genius. That's a smart dog right there. That
Oh,
is a
he is.
really smart dog.
Morphe is a smart dog. So you've been writing a lot about HR and recruiting
Mhm.
related issues and HR technology related issues for, I think, longer than you care to disclose, like you mentioned.
Truth. Truth.
What's one piece of advice you have for HR professionals who are looking to adopt or learn new technology?
Sure. So the bit of advice that I would say is you go slow to go fast. So this was taught to me when I was training for a triathlon, in swimming in particular, because I'm not a great swimmer. And the instructor was basically saying, "Listen, you're not trying to go fast. Don't try to get in the water and go fast. Get your form down, get your fundamentals down, and go slow. And as you get your fundamentals down, then you'll go fast." So the thing is when you look at all the technology, there's more technology out there than you possibly evaluate. The thing is once you know you have a problem with something, and let's say it's performance reviews, and you want to make a switch, or you want to do something different, don't rush to jump into a new technology. Evaluate your process. So again, let's take its performance reviews and goal setting and feedback. Reevaluate how you're doing it currently and how you'd like to do it. Build that process, or refine, redo. Let's use the again. Uh, Redo that process and make sure you got your process right. Fix it, and then go look at technology vendors that then can help you enable that process. And so you don't rush out to buy technology. It's very purposeful when you buy technology. It should be very purposeful on something you're trying to fix. And so you go slow to go fast. You will ultimately go fast, but you start off by going slow and being very methodical about what's broken, what are we trying to fix, and why.
Great advice. And I love the analogy. So, as we prepare for more remote work and more work
Mhm.
from home and more of everything virtual, how do you think our HR function can prepare for this for the future?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. It's first of all, I think what we've learned is we need to meet candidates and employees where they are, and be super flexible as HR and recruiters. So we need to learn and I think we have done a great job of this, by the way. So I think in learning flexibility, I think we have done that. We just need to incorporate that in our go forward philosophy. I think it's secondly, I think focusing on the outcomes of work rather than how the work gets done is now should be important to us.
Yes.
So thinking about what is the outcome of that work, that job, instead of how they get it done, or that loosens up our thinking around whether or not it's a hybrid model, whether or not they're in the office, whether or not they're across the globe or remote or whatever, or any of those blends of that. It's focused on the outputs or the outcomes. And I think the last thing I'd say, and it's probably something we haven't talked about enough yet about, is to make sure that new biases don't creep in to this new hybrid model of work, where you have some employees that are at the office, some employees that are virtual or remote. Do the folks that are at the office, do they get promoted, more frequently, or do you know what I'm saying? Like, so what can we do to prevent? And again, we don't have this problem yet. It's a future problem, but we should probably start thinking about it now, is to think about the biases that might creep in with a hybrid work model.
Great point. Great point. Definitely something to ponder. Definitely. So that brings us to the question connection section of our podcast and video.
Fun part.
Yeah, the fun part.
I'm ready.
All right. So who's one person you've gained in your network in the past year that you think everyone in the HR tech world should know about?
So much cheating, so three. But I promise these are folks that I'm encouraged when I see them posting, because they're positive and they're giving back. It's Jeffrey Shapiro, Laura Mazzullo, and Rocky Howard. Rocky Howard's probably a little bit lesser known in our community. She's the chief diversity officer at Smart Recruiters. All three of them, in different ways, are just putting out really positive content. They're trying to make people better. They're holding people accountable. They're giving back. They're funny and sarcastic and doing all that stuff. So it's all three of those people are just people that, if they're not in your network or not in your, in your sphere, all three of them should be.
I know two of them, so I'm going to look up the third one, and I'm going to link their accounts in the show notes for everyone as well.
Absolutely.
What's your favorite HR podcast?
Well, I'm going to cheat again too. So the two I'm listening to that are automatics, of course, with the 300 podcasts, it's hard because I typically listen to podcasts like everyone else. I'll have it just on shuffle. But the ones that I make sure to listen to are Laurie Ruettimann's Betting on You podcast and Lars Schmidt's Refining HR podcast, mostly because they put on guests that I don't know, and I like that. And they do probative kind of Terry Gross types of interviews that go deep into and with people that I don't know. So I like both of those. But there's also another, again, 298 podcasts that I also love. But those are the two that I would suggest, or that I always make sure to hit first when they get published.
Wonderful. I'll link their podcasts down in the show notes as well. And what's your favorite LinkedIn Learning or e-learning webinar? As we have a lot of them in HR, but as they relate to HR tech, what's your favorite?
So this will sound self-serving, but I promise it's not. It's our Recruiting Daily has an HRTX event that we've been doing virtually during COVID, and will continue this year. That's just training. That's hardcore training on technology. And I know that there's a lot of great ones out there, but a lot of them are vendor sponsored. They're basically vendors teaching about stuff, which is good. The ones that we've created last year and this year are practitioners, teaching about how they use technology, which I think is always, better to hear a practitioner say, here's how I used, We'll use Hire Tool or Seek Out or Hiring Soft. Here's how I used it to source technical talent or diverse talent or this, that, and the other. So I like, and again, it sounds like I'm promoting our stuff, and I just couldn't find as you listed the question, I really sought out things, and I couldn't find anything better than what we're doing.
So given the upheaval of all things HR and all things work in 2020, what's one workplace trend you think is here to stay?
Well, I think it's a combination of two things, and they're linked. It's radical flexibility on one hand and hyper personalization on the other. So one of the things that we've learned is that as HR professionals is we have to be flexible. If we were inflexible in January or February of last year, we learned flexibility at gunpoint. But I think that concept of flexibility isn't going away. And so I think because candidates and employees have got a taste of flexibility, and we've gotten a taste of giving flexibility and being flexible, I think flexibility is something that goes forward with us. I also think that's in tandem with personalization, making sure that we meet people where they are at all times. If we're doing, feedback, like you and I are at the same organization, you might need feedback different than I need it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to learn that to when we give you feedback, when the organization gives you feedback, they do it in a way that you will respond to it. And when they give me feedback, they give it to me in the way that I want. That's personalization. So how do we personalize things, and how do we maintain this kind of radical flexibility in the future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from 2020. Flexibility in every sphere of our lives. Absolutely.
100%. 100%. Personal, professional, family, kids, everything.
Everything.
We've learned to be flexible and also be at peace with flexibility, which is, flexibility in and of itself can also cause a lot of confusion and anxiety, but I think we've actually done a pretty good job of consuming that and saying, okay, we're just going to be flexible. All righty. Well, this is now the job. All right.
Absolutely. I always have this analogy of stretching a rubber band and holding, and stretching it and seeing how flexible it can be to a point before it breaks, right?
Yes.
And I think we are at that point. We need
100%.
we need to let go.
Bamboo. Yeah, exactly. Bamboo, rubber band. At one point it breaks. But I think we've learned, which is great too, and to your point, Jay, is we've learned that we had a lot more rubber band to go.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so one thing I want to make sure that when practitioners listen to this is like, hey, you should kind of pat yourself on the back. You probably didn't know that you had this flexibility, this massive amount of flexibility in you, and you probably weren't giving yourself enough credit. And so, we should probably recognize that, yes, we did it at gunpoint because we had to, but also I think we've gotten good at being flexible and not having that anxiety and not having the stress that can come along with being flexible.
Absolutely. And I think that everyone's in the same situation. So that's actually helped because it's not as stressful as
100%.
before if you were trying to be flexible, in the past.
That's right. If you were out on an island by yourself, it would be massively stressful. But the fact that all your peers are going through the exact same thing, that I think that helps. I think that has helped us, to be able to relate to each other also. That, hey, your team is having to learn how to do hiring remotely. My team's having to learn that as well. What can we learn from each other? So I think it's helped us relate, I think, and be relatable to others as well.
And when you talk about the island, I can think of Tom Hanks when he, his movie.
Castaway.
Castaway. And when he, contracted COVID in Australia, they sent him
Wilson.
Ball. Everyone
Yeah, yeah.
signed it. That
That's so
kind of
genius.
that kind of camaraderie across the
Yeah.
globe has really, I think, helped a lot of folks deal with
Oh
this
yeah.
right now.
I think you're right. I mean, that's we see the best. We can see the worst of when hardship comes. We can see kind of the worst of humanity. But I think some of what we've seen during COVID, especially from an HR recruiting perspective, is we've seen some of the best
Absolutely.
of what we can be and what we can do. And so, you don't want the bad things to happen, but at the same time, I think we've responded quite well.
Absolutely. So, how do you enjoy giving back to the HR community?
I would say probably three things. One is I love talking to practitioners about HR tech because they've got a job and they're doing a bit, and they're not looking at all the people that are getting funded or being acquired or new tech coming to market. And so I love talking to people about HR tech and just giving them pointers and advice on what to and not to do. Secondly, I love speaking at events and webinars, and pushing myself to think new thoughts and to also put those new thoughts in front of people and get feedback, find out is it a good thought, bad thought, etc. And thirdly, I'd say suggest that I love basically just making myself available for practitioners to just talk. I think sometimes what I found with HRs, they just need a sounding board by and large. They might even know what to do and where they're going to go with something, but they want to bounce that idea off somebody. And
Yeah.
so having a nice peer group and in someone that they feel safe with, that they can then just go, hey, I'm thinking about changing jobs. I'm thinking about letting this team go. There are like hard decisions. I think we all need kind of a mentor, an advisory group, whatever you want to call that. But I think just being a proper sounding board for practitioners, I enjoy that, and I like making myself available for folks if they need that. Again, you can't force somebody to talk to you, but nor
Absolutely.
should you.
Absolutely.
But just making myself available, I think, is important.
Thank you for being that for the community. You've been my mentor too in the beginning of the pandemic when I first spoke to you. So thank you for
Yep.
being available and making yourself available. That's the
No
most
worries.
important part. And everyone needs that spark. I call it spark. I call all of you my sparks in my community, in my network. I look to you for the sparks because I reach out to you when I need help, and I also reach out to you when I'm joyful and I want to share stuff.
100%.
So it's the sparks that matter, and I'm so thankful that all of you are in my community and in my network, and I'm sure a lot of folks are thankful for the work you're doing for
Well,
the
thank
HR
you.
community.
It's
So
I think it's those things, Jay. It's the highs and lows. It's easy to be someone's friend and comrade when they're going through good times. But when they're going through a bit of depression, or they got laid off, or they're having some type of conundrum, that's difficult. And I think that's what kind of proves what kind of person you are, is that you're there for them throughout all those times, the good times and bad.
absolutely, absolutely. So thank you so much for being
Sure.
here for our audience and for
This was
me.
fantastic.
I really
Absolutely.
appreciate it. If our listeners or audience wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
It's going to be really easy. Just Google WilliamTincup, and you will, you know, the plus and minus of having the last name Tincup, right? There's not many of us, and because I'm relatively social, I'm literally everywhere. So if you just Google my name, you'll find my cell number, you'll find my email address and all that other stuff. And obviously, you can go to LinkedIn, you can go to any social network. I'm actually comfortable with all of them. And so wherever you want to go, just reach out to me.
Absolutely. And I will link your profile in the show notes
Sure.
for anyone who would like to connect with you as well. You're kind of like the David Letterman of HR and HR tech. So I'm sure they'll find you everywhere.
It's again, it's the positive and negatives. Mike Smith, it would be really hard. I'd have to actually give you like an email address or whatever. But
Yes.
with the last name Tincup, it's relatively easy to find me.
Absolutely. So thank you for tuning in, everyone. And I look forward to bringing you more global stories from HR tech and HR professionals across the globe. Thank you.